And hopefully this is recording. Can you sign in? And then I have a couple FRQs up there for you. Everything that's up there is released so you guys can take it home. So let's just do a quick review of the immune system. So there are like two branches of the immune system. There's innate immunity that you're born with, and then it's either called the acquired immune system because you get it as you age, or it's called adaptive because it's changing. So some of the easiest, like we'll just start with innate and then we'll come to acquired. But the first part of the innate immune system is just barriers. So that could be like your skin is like a barrier to pathogens. It could be like the digestive enzymes in your eyes, or like your stomach enzymes, just anything like that. pH of your stomach, pH of your skin, and like all of those are resistant to pathogens. Another one will be phagocytic cells. Phagocytic cells will go through phagocytosis when they see a pathogen. So a pathogen could be bacteria, virus, fungus, and the phagocytic cells will surround the pathogen. They'll bring it inside of themselves through endocytosis. And then what do they do with this pathogen once it's inside? Once it's inside, and when it's in a little vesicle, right? Because this membrane pinched around it. So when it comes into the cell, it's in its own little pouch. What cell organelle will merge with that vesicle to destroy this pathogen? You remember lysosomes? That was way back in Unit 2. So lysosomes are organelles that have, they're going to call them hydrolytic enzymes. Those hydrolysis reactions break things apart. So they're just enzymes that break apart the pathogen. So hydrolytic enzymes are ones that break things down into little pieces. So when the lysosome merges with the pathogen, it can destroy the pathogen, but all of these enzymes that could destroy the rest of the cell are still contained in that membrane. So some of your phagocytic cells would be like macrophages, neutrophils, but you don't have to memorize all of those because they're going to come up in the model or they'll come up in the text when they give you the scenario. But if it's engulfing it, breaking it down, then we know that that's a phagocytic cell. Now, this is something that you're born with because these phagocytic cells like neutrophils, macrophages, they see like generic receptors that are found on most pathogens. So these kind of generic receptors are on the pathogen, and they kind of just, every cell has proteins on their surface, and they'll identify these generic toll-like receptors, and that will cause them to go through endocytosis and destroy those. They'll get a lot of pathogens this way, but of course, like bacteria and fungi, like they're going through evolution and they're evolving defenses where they'll change the receptors so they're not identified any longer. So some of these are going to get past the innate immune system. The third type of innate immunity are natural killer cells. Phagocytic cells identify the pathogen. So they destroy things outside of the cell. Natural killer cells don't identify the pathogen, but they identify abnormal cells. So those could either be cells that are infected. So you have a cell that's infected by a bunch of bacteria or viruses, or it could be cancerous cells. And they're going to identify markers on the surface of those cells in a very similar fashion, and they are going to identify when those cells are abnormal based on what surface proteins are being expressed or lacked. And instead of going through phagocytosis, they're going to use chemicals to destroy the other cells and force them to go through apoptosis. So we kind of have like two lines of internal defenses here. We have the barrier, but if something gets past the barrier, it can either kill the pathogen, and that's what the phagocytic cells do, or it can kill the abnormal cells, and that's what the natural killer cells do. Now we have the like acquired or adaptive. Yeah. You're going to see a lot with sickle cell anemia in various ways. You might see it in evolution. You might see it in genetics because it's a nice example of, like, depending at the organism level, it's complete dominance. At the cellular level, it's incomplete dominance. So you might see it in genetics too. But that's not an infectious disease. That's a genetic disease. So you wouldn't see it here so much. Acquired or adaptive immunity has two lines of defense too. So by the phagocytic cells, I'm going to put the humoral response. These are all about B cells. And I'm putting them in the same line as these phagocytic cells because they identify pathogens. These are cells that make antibodies, and those antibodies will attach to pathogens. So, like on Mr. Incredible, like when he goes into like the volcano and they identify him and they shoot him with a whole bunch of those balls, like that would be the antibodies that are attaching to him. So what I want you to know is the antibodies don't kill the pathogen. Like Mr. Incredible was just like, he was stuck. Like he couldn't go anywhere. So the same way here, like the pathogen is stuck. It can't infect other cells. But a phagocytic cell would have to come and then destroy the pathogen. It just sticks to the pathogen and immobilizes it until a phagocytic cell can come and destroy it. The other line of defense, here we have something that identifies a pathogen. We have to have our complement to the natural killer cells, and this is going to be the cell-mediated response. This is going to be about T cells. They are going to identify abnormal cells or cancerous cells. So you have like two different responses that do the same thing that the innate immune system does, But what's different with the acquired immune response is this is a very specific and targeted response, and this is more general. Things can get past the innate immune response, but if you have adaptive immunity, it's much more specific and it targets one pathogen, not just a broad general group. And if you get past the innate immune response, eventually the acquired immune response can detect you. Any questions on that so far? Okay. One